So, as an addendum to the previous video, because I forgot to say it, one of the things we also try to do as best as possible in Warrior Flow. And that is, and I say as best as possible because nothing's ever perfect. I mean, it's kind of like, what Vince Lombardi said, if we chase perfection you're never going to get to perfection because it's unknowable. But if you chase perfection, you can catch excellence along the way. So I'm always trying to catch excellence along the way. And one of the things I want to talk about real briefly is this idea of natural movement, because I think it's a lost understanding. So when you and I move, there's a couple things that our bodies do all of the time. There's no way around it. And that is, first of all human movement, and I've talked about this in other videos, but probably not as well as I should have. All human movement, no matter what, has either a circular or arcing motion to it. So when I extend my arm, it's not that my arm, while my fist may be going straight, as you can see, I'll slow it down, you can see my elbow kind of slightly going out as my shoulder rotates, right? But obviously, if my fist is going out vertically, then my hand actually has to be adjusting and moving in the opposite direction. It's really cool how our bodies do that. And one of the reasons why we try to emphasize natural movement as much as possible is because natural movement hides a lot of your intention. In other words, if I'm in a situation, and I got to deal with someone, the more rigid and unnatural I put myself into as a position, the harder it is to do things. And it doesn't mean I'm going to stand there like this. I'm going to have my hands up, doing whatever I got to do, being prepared for something, trying to, kind of talk them off the ledge there, so to speak. But I'm also internally, mentally, I'm prepared to take action. But in order to get like that, you got to practice that. And you got to kind of like put your mind in that place of, how would I be if I was in a situation like this? So that you learn how to kind of control that adrenaline rush. The adrenaline is not magic, right? Like some people talk about like it's magic. Adrenaline doesn't make you a better fighter. It just means you'll do the same stupid stuff you've been doing with more energy, more force. That's all it means. But it also acts as a natural anesthesia. So you get away with a few things as long as you don't get knocked out. But the other thing is with natural movement, the reason why we put an emphasis on natural movement as much as possible is because natural movement is always efficient. Just rolling my hand forward. The reason why that's efficient and works is because that's how your arm works. Putting my hand out like this in this natural position, it works because that's how your arms work. Lifting my leg and extending my foot and doing that works because that's how my leg works. I don't need some exotic positioning or whatever the case may be. So in Warrior Flow, when we're practicing exercises, when we're practicing drills, I always emphasize to people to not get so wrapped around the axle over how something looks or perceive how something's supposed to look, and focus more on the natural motion. How does it feel when I'm moving back and forth? How does it feel to my body? How can I, if I got, some kind of injury, like bad knees or whatever the case may be, how can I work around that problem? Because in a real fight, I'm sorry, but the bad guys are not going to cut you any slack just because your knees are hurting that day. So the idea of natural movement is, it also allows me and allows you to move in ways where you can actually change direction and train yourself on a neurological level to change direction as quickly as possible, because you're not trying to overcome, being in cat stance or whatever the case may be. And I know some people, when I do that stuff, they think I'm making fun of other arts. I'm not making fun of other arts. I'm just saying, I've never seen this in a real fight. I don't know where that comes from. I've never seen it in a real fight. Sorry. I've seen a lot of people windmilling on people. I've seen a lot of people trying to dump people on their head. And I've even experienced some of that myself. But, cat stance, whatever, the Karate Kid thing, I've never seen it. I'm just saying. So the more natural the movement, the more likely you can make it work, simply because you don't have to overcome your own body. And so in Warrior Flow, we try as best as possible in everything we do to move as naturally as possible. And by the way, when we're practicing a new skill, myself included, when I'm practicing a new skill, it's never fluid and smooth. It always starts off stiff, awkward, uncoordinated, etc., because it's just the way the human body is, but that's how the brain works. You know, as a matter of fact, the more you do something, while it reinforces it only to a point. For those who've lifted weights, you know, if you go into the weight room and you lift the same weight all the time, at a certain point, your body gets used to that and you just stop growing. That's where plateauing comes in. So this is why even when I'm doing things that, you know, are easy for me, I always, once I've done it maybe with a warm up, try to add a little twist to it to make it just a little harder. It could be something as simple as standing on one leg as a positive sphere and trying to see how low I can get without falling over or whatever the case may be. Just to build it up, but also just to acclimate myself to being in that kind of a position so that, God forbid, you know, I slip and I go like this, that the last thing I do is freak out and then get punched in the face, but then I'm doing something that's going to allow me to quickly recover. So when you're moving and you're practicing stuff, when you're throwing punches, when you're throwing uppercuts, hook punches, whatever you're practicing, you want to try within that technique to still feel as natural as possible. And what you'll find is the more natural you try to be within those techniques over a very short period of time, because you're not fighting against your body, that actually the faster you learn how to develop that skill and the easier it becomes. And I was watching a video the other day. I got to give credit where credit is due now, because I'm all about knife fighting. And I was watching, what's his name? I should know it off because I was watching Instructor Conrad. You know, kudos to him. And he was showing, and I'm not going to do everything he was doing, but he was showing different ways in which he moves with the knife. And what I noticed in the video, and I'm not sure if he was doing it on purpose, but if he was, great. If he wasn't, it's still great. And that is, as he was moving, the fluidness of his body movement and the way he moved. I'm telling you now, if that guy has a knife in his hand and you're acting stupid, you're never going to see it. It'll happen faster than you can imagine. And that's because his movement is so fluid. Like I said, there's a couple other guys out there who have these moves. It's so fluid in the way he moves with a knife and how he moves to hide it and protect himself. You just won't see it. It's almost, if you watch him carefully and you're not paying attention to what he's doing, the way he's moving with the knife almost looks like a magic trick. It's pretty cool watching. That's why I like watching his videos, because he has these things where it looks like he does something innocuous, but you realize, oh my God, like he just like slit somebody's belly open from like, you know, from like, you know, their bladder up to like their throat. So the point is, when you're watching people, there's a couple of people I watch online, and I watch how they move when they're actually doing stuff dynamic. I realize it is so natural to them because they've done it enough, but also on a certain level, they've practiced moving in a way where they're not giving away. I was watching a video not long ago, Grandmaster Kwok, you know, Wing Chun master, doing a demonstration. And his demonstrations, when he moves at speed, look nothing like the stuff you see almost anywhere. You know, he'll demonstrate a technique like this, and then boom, and it's just over. And you realize he gets it. He's like, yeah, you know, these techniques are just that. They're basic guides. You know, in Warrior Flow, we kind of use technique as kind of a structure to build from. You know, we're not against technique. We just don't try to fall in love with it. You know, like Musashi said, you know, you should have no favorite weapon. And so I like that. Plus, you know, what did Musashi know? I mean, you know, the guy probably killed over 1,000 people, you know, so I guess he knows a little bit about what he's talking about. But the point is right. I don't want to have, quote unquote, any favorite technique per se. I mean, there are things that I do that are consistent because they're just easier for me to do. And, you know, it kind of gets me into the fight as quickly as possible to end it as quickly as possible. But I'm also kind of objective that should I throw a strike, because I always like to hit people right in the throat right off the bat and just put them down and end it. If that doesn't work, or they slap my hand out of the way, I can move in and do something else. This is the whole purpose of the, you know, sensory flow exercise that we do with each other. You know, the sensory flow exercise is just a training, you know, methodology that allows us to learn just how to deal with the motion of another person, but also to practice the techniques in a fluid, kind of almost natural manner, so that when I'm stepping past, okay, maybe it doesn't look cool, you know, maybe I didn't do something like this, but if I'm stepping past protecting my head and I do something like that, as long as it works, who cares? So when you're practicing stuff, just keep in mind too, you know, like I said, this is an addendum to the last video I put out, and that is, you know, think about being as natural in your movement, as fluid in your movement as possible. And also try to go back to how you were when you were 10 years old. Try to think about how you moved when you were 10 years old, just totally free, totally uninhibited in your movement. And what you're going to find is you actually still retain a little of that, but you got to kind of get out of your own way, and also get over your ego of not looking cool all the time. So hopefully this enlightens some folks, because like I said, I can go on and on about this stuff, and like I said, I'll probably keep building on this stuff. But for those of you, like I said, who ever had the pleasure of working with Grandmaster Perkins, one of the things you'll notice is he just did whatever he wanted in his body. And a part of that was because, as he kind of admitted to me, ever since he was a kid, he always tried to make other people feel awkward when moving with him. My point is, he never got out of moving like he was some 10-year-old kid. And so that's what kind of threw everybody off when you're trying to deal with it. All of a sudden he does something, big belly and all, and do something, and then it kicks you in the face with some crazy thing he could do. But, he had some talent. Don't let anybody fool you. So hopefully, like I said, because I can go on and on about this, you got something out of this.